Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today, I want to return to the topic of indebtedness. I've done essentially one episode where I talked about using reality creation to overcome debts, and we covered an older writing from Elizabethtown. And I wanted to go over some stuff that Catherine Ponder talks about, overcoming indebtedness, using some affirmations. One of the hardest things to overcome when you learn about the principles of the law of attraction and reality transurfing and reality creation is, how do I pay off my debts? If you sit around and focus on your debts, even imagining paying your debts, it always appears that you get more debt. So it's a kind of Chinese finger toy. The harder you try, the worse it gets. And it's a sign of some other deep subconscious things that may be going on. I mean, if you want to have anything you want and you have a credit card that can pay for it, why not just do it now? Why, in general, can't you just run up all your credit cards and eventually just pay them all off? And that may be possible. It is a truth that many successful businesses have a lot of debt. Debt is not a bad thing. Debt can be used to create incredible wealth. But Catherine Ponder talks about it. She has some amazing affirmations, and I want to talk about her training on this, and it should help you if you're out there suffering from debt. I get a lot of people that contact me, and one of the number one things they're struggling with is debt. You may be prosperous. You may be making a ton of money, but you have a ton of debt. And debt can be crippling, very hard to overcome. In my own case, back in 2008, when I lost my job, as many people did during the foreclosure crisis, I was in the mortgage business, and I had a ton of debt, way too much debt, and I couldn't pay it. And I didn't know what to do. Didn't know if I should declare bankruptcy or just ignore it. And the collectors and the creditors, they started calling me, and I would ignore the phone calls, and they would knock on my door, and this created a feedback loop. It was a constant thing. So for a while, I couldn't even get credit card debt. I had to live outside of it, and it was crippling to me. And so when I was able to pay all of this off, I paid it off so easily when I thought that I could never pay it off. I was able to pay it all off by using the principles of reality creation, quantum jumping, law of attraction, and certain affirmations that had really helped me out. So if you're struggling with this, I want to help you. Catherine Ponder was an amazing, and is an amazing New Thought teacher. She has written more than a dozen books that include bestsellers as Millionaires of the Bible. She's a minister of the Unity Faith Church, and I just recommend many of her books. One of my favorites is Open Your Mind to Prosperity and the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. She has in particular a teaching on learning how to receive, which I found to be fundamentally transformational. In a recent cartoon, Catherine Ponder begins, several beautiful new cars were on display in a showroom. Above them hung a sign which read, "Try our credit plan with easy payments." While a prospective customer stood viewing one of the new cars, the salesman rushed over to the manager and in great perplexity asked, "How do I go about this?" The customer wants to pay cash. In this age when credit is at an all-time high, what about indebtedness with regard to prosperous thinking? Credit wisely used is a rich asset to financial success. Credit that is abused or overused is a clear path to indebtedness and financial failure. Credit is not desirable if used in desperation to postpone financial disaster a little longer. Neither is it good if used for acquiring items which you cannot pay for without great mental anguish. Credit is intended to be used intelligently toward helping one enjoy the comforts of life in a reasonable manner. Credit may also be used intelligently in realizing a profit. A housewife who suddenly found herself widowed with 3 children to support wished to go into business for herself. She borrowed money, invested it, made a profit from the investment within a short time, repaid the borrowed money, and opened her own business with the surplus. The intelligent use of credit proved a financial asset to her. A good rule to follow in order to avoid the pitfalls of misused credit is this: do not incur bills that burden you with the feeling of lack and limitation. You may incur reasonable financial obligations if you can do so with an easy mind, in the faith that you can meet them in a reasonable manner. Resentment and fear cause indebtedness. No debt is good if you resent or fear it, because such an attitude causes it to become a burden. The thought of burden often stops the flow of substance into your affairs, as well as hindering the flow of new, prosperous ideas in your thinking. When the flow of substance is halted in either of these ways, you are then unable to meet your bills, and panic and resentment take over. So long as you do not resent or fear financial obligations, you can maintain mental and emotional control over them in your thoughts, feelings, and actions. When you maintain a feeling of control, not feeling helplessly bound to debts, you keep the way open for the rich substance of the universe to flow to you in expected and unexpected ways, making it possible for you to meet each obligation. It is axiomatic that if you look up, you will always be provided for. Surely uplifted thinking, free from fear, resentment, and condemnation, is necessary in order to maintain a debt-free existence. A housewife related how thoughts of fear, resentment, and condemnation got her into debt, and how by changing her attitudes, she got out of debt. Her husband was a line salesman whose work took him far from home. Early in their marriage, they purchased a farm in the mountains of Kentucky, deciding that would be an ideal place to rear their children. Since her husband traveled regularly, the wife was responsible for supervising the farm and caring for their growing children. In due time, she began to resent her responsibilities. As her resentment grew, it seemed more and more difficult to meet the ever-increasing financial obligations that attended the farm's progress. Finally, she had to borrow money to pay the workers, to purchase farm equipment, and to meet general expenses of the farm. Soon, she was in debt, though the farm had excellent potential. At this point, she heard about the power of prosperous thinking and began to assess her indebtedness from the standpoint of her mental attitudes. One busy afternoon, when she was wondering how she would meet the payroll that week, she drove up on a lovely hill overlooking a peaceful area where cattle were grazing. There she stopped and meditated for a time on the peaceful beauty of the scene below. She realized that she had resented her husband's absence from home. Though she knew that he was only trying to provide for his family, she further realized that she had been resenting the responsibility of running the farm alone, although it was a valuable asset. As she reflected in this upward state of mind, a feeling of peace came, and the thought of burdensome debt, resentment, and condemnation passed. She then silently asked for divine guidance for herself, her husband, the children, the farm, the workers. She gave thanks for financial success and freedom from indebtedness. When she drove into town the next day, a friend told her that he wanted to buy some farm equipment. She advised him that she had such farm equipment stored away unused. A purchase was arranged that quickly liquidated all of her debts. Later, as her former resentments were replaced by love and appreciation for the farm, her husband decided to give up his sales work, to move his family into town, and to go into the contracting business. A competent manager was hired to run the farm. As this woman continued to praise and give thanks for her many blessings, her farm and her husband's new business both prospered. She now enjoys a happy home life with her husband and children, along with taking an active part in church and community affairs. This lady proved to her own satisfaction that the thoughts of resentment and condemnation had caused her sense of burden, which in turn had stopped the flow of substance in her affairs. When she no longer resented her obligations, she gained control of them and was able to meet them victoriously. Criticism produces indebtedness. When bills come due, greet them in an unruffled frame of mind, reminding yourself that they represent blessings you are already enjoying. A negative, critical attitude toward bills causes many people to get into debt and to stay there. I know a family that constantly fumed over their monthly bills. Certain bills continued to rise unreasonably. They found themselves further and further in debt. When these people learned of the power of prosperous thinking for getting bills paid, they stopped condemning the bills. Instead, they began to affirm, "We use the prosperous power of divine intelligence in wisdom, integrity, and good judgment in all our financial affairs. We give thanks that every financial obligation is paid on time." Thereafter, their bills decreased to reasonable size again. It is not only unpleasant and unnecessary, but foolish and dangerous to waste time and energy criticizing anything, especially financial obligations owed or owing you. Such a negative practice can lead to permanent indebtedness and even to utter financial ruin. If you are not willing to give off the substance that comes to you to pay your bills, why should you reasonably expect the rich substance of the universe to flow easily into your life? An ungrateful attitude of mind brings ungrateful, limited financial results. Gratitude prospers. The attitude of gratitude keeps prosperity coming to you from every direction. Recently, while lecturing in Palm Beach, Florida area, the truth of this was brought to my attention. A minister there told me that the wealthiest people in the congregation seemed to be the most receptive and appreciative for any spiritual service rendered them. He stated that often when a person of average means is hospitalized and requests a ministerial call, their opening remark to the minister is, "Where have you been? Why did it take you so long to get here?" Yet he finds on visits to millionaires who are hospitalized, they invariably are disarmingly grateful that he had taken time to drop by to see them. He observed that his millionaire friends regularly wrote notes of thanks for any kindness received. He felt that the mental attitude of gratitude and thanksgiving was a convincing clue to their great wealth. Never criticize or condemn anything or anyone if you wish to become debt-free and to remain debt-free, as stated in the chapter on your special powers for prosperity. The scientists now believe that everything is endowed with an innate intelligence that knows what you say, think, and feel about. If you speak of things, people, and conditions in a positive, prosperous way, you gain their subconscious cooperation, whereas if you criticize your world, you repel its blessings and attract only negative, limited conditions into your life. A merchant found that his merchandise was not selling, though in the past he had been quite successful. He tried holding special sales, making special offers, and other methods to sell his merchandise. Many of his accounts were overdue, on which he seemed unable to collect. He was floundering deeper into personal indebtedness. Finally, he realized that he had become quite critical of himself, his business, customers, family, neighbors, community, and the world in general. It was then that he asked a friend who knew of the power of prosperous thinking to help him get his own thinking straightened out. The friend suggested he begin using this statement to change his thinking. "There is no criticism or condemnation in me, for me or against me. Divine love, wisdom, and order now reveal perfect guidance and produce perfect results in me and in my world." With the circulation of these ideas in his thinking, this merchant developed a friendlier feeling toward his customers. Along with mailing out monthly statements of current accounts, he decided to send along notes of good wishes to those who had long owed him money. The results were amazing. People with long overdue accounts began to pay up. One lady sent him a check on an account she had been owing him for 10 years. The technique of getting debts paid, both those you owe and those owed to you, is first an inner work in the realm of mental attitudes. Others are so repelled by your critical, unforgiving, condemnatory thoughts that they shrink from wanting to pay you what is owed. As you change your thinking about them, they subconsciously feel it and respond in a more positive way. Do your paperwork. Instead of fretting about your own debts or those owed by others, sit down and boldly list those obligations on paper. Then go a step further and dare to write out dates by which you wish to see them fully paid. Next, write this affirmation at the bottom of your list and use it daily. I give thanks for the immediate, complete payment of all financial obligations. I have faith that with God's help, all obligations are being immediately paid in full. A businessman who is self-employed had tried the usual methods for collecting accounts with little success. He learned of the positive mental technique for handling finances, and he decided to give it a try. He listed each customer's name along with the amount due and then affirmed the complete payment of each obligation. Thereafter, when he went forth to collect, he was amazed that no one seemed to oppose him or sought to avoid him. Instead, everyone on the list paid him promptly. An interior decorator had been out of work for some time and was $2,500 in debt. During a summer slack season, she heard a lecture on the power of prosperous thinking for overcoming financial lack. She made a list of her financial obligations, added the above affirmation, and used it every day in thinking of her bills as being paid. Again, the above affirmation is, I give thanks for the immediate, complete payment of all financial obligations. I have faith that with God's help, all obligations are being immediately paid in full. Just the act of doing this gave her a sense of accomplishment, which replaced the previous feeling of futility. As she affirmed that her debts were being paid in God's own way, an interesting thing happened. A friend of a former customer telephoned and asked her to do an estimate for decorating a new apartment building. She had never been asked to consider such a large decorating job before. Never before had a client contacted her first. She had always sought out new clients. Her estimate, running between $8,000 and $10,000, was accepted. She was given the decorating job and her commission amounted to $2,500. Not only did she get her own bills paid, but this proved to be the first of a series of large decorating jobs that came to her. Previously, she had worked hard for small commissions. Now she's working steadily for big commissions. Activating trust dissolves indebtedness. Here is a pleasant point to remember about indebtedness. If you are in debt, it is because someone believed in you and had enough faith in you to trust you financially. If others are in debt to you, it is because you extended your trust to them. Trust is a wonderful, divine element, and it produces divine results when activated. Whenever you think of owing or being owed, give thanks for the trust that brought about the financial transaction in the first place. Know also that the same trust which worked in the beginning can still work to bring forth the full payment due. Reestablish this attitude by affirming, the same divine trust that first motivated this financial transaction is now mightily at work clearing it up for the highest good of all concerned. A credit manager used this idea to collect substantial sums of money for his company, often after other collectors have failed. In one instance, he was asked to collect a $17,000 account, which had been outstanding for several years. When he talked with the man owing this account, it soon became evident that he was in dire financial straits. Nevertheless, this credit manager stated his faith that his creditor would settle the account as soon as possible. He thereby restored goodwill and renewed trust between firm and the creditor. In less than 2 weeks, the creditor brought him a check for $4,000. He stated that the credit manager's words of faith in him and his business ability gave him new courage, new hope, new conviction that he could succeed. With new hope came new ideas, which produced for him prosperous results. Soon, the entire amount was paid, and the creditor continues to do business with this company. Discord causes indebtedness. A harmonious, trustful state of mind is essential to gain freedom from indebtedness and for collecting debts owed you by others. You will note on every hand that inharmonious people work very hard for their prosperity. The substance of the universe is repelled by inharmoniousness and quickly dissipates in such an atmosphere. This explains why a certain salesman was not selling. His wife was also failing in her sales work. After a few minutes' conversation with them, it was obvious their home life was filled with bickering and contention. They criticized and condemned each other, openly disagreeing about every subject. It was pointed out that they would have to become more harmonious with each other before they would be able to attract customers and make sales again. They agreed to use this statement together: there is no condemnation or criticism between us. Divine love reigns supreme, and all is well with us and with our world. Within 2 weeks, they were both making sales again, and their marriage became happier than ever before. There is a way out of indebtedness. Indebtedness may appear to be very big in your world, but it need only be a temporary situation if you dare to begin believing there is a way out. Perhaps one of the greatest barriers to freedom from indebtedness is fear and desperation. When they are overcome, you are on your way to financial freedom. I recently talked with a man whose wife had feared that he was contemplating suicide. He was heavily in debt and could see no way out. He had been in an accident and had taken a year of recuperation before he returned to his business. Meanwhile, others lacking his experience and knowledge had to be relied upon to run his business. Though conscientious in their desire to help, they almost bankrupted him. Because of this large indebtedness and lack of sufficient collateral, this man had been unable to obtain a loan from the lending agencies to ease the situation. He declared, "If I could obtain even $5,000 or $6,000, it would meet the most pressing debts and keep my business solvent until I could get the business activated again." He was feeling quite desperate when he talked with me. I began to realize that two definite attitudes prevailed, which were keeping a solution from appearing. First, this fine businessman had sunk into discouragement and despair. There seemed no way out, nowhere to turn. Second, he felt a sense of great loss about the year he had been ill. He kept telling himself, if only I had not been in that accident, this would not have happened. Such attitudes are normal for people in debt, but once those attitudes are changed, the whole situation will change, and very fast. Always, for every problem, there is a way out. There is a divine solution to help establish and maintain the prosperous attitude until it could prove itself. I suggested he daily affirm. There is a divine solution to this situation. The divine solution is the sublime solution. I give thanks that the divine solution quickly appears now. For his feeling of loss about the year away from work, these ideas were suggested. Although it seems dismal at the moment, begin knowing there need be no permanent loss in this experience. That which seems to have been lost during this year's illness can be divinely restored to you, financially and otherwise. To help him establish and maintain this attitude, these words were typed on a card for him to carry in his wallet. Daily, when discouragement or sense of loss tried to envelope him, he was urged to read these words over and over. I give thanks for divine restoration in my business affairs. Divine restoration is now doing its perfect work for all involved, and the perfect result appears now. I give thanks that every financial obligation is now being met in God's own wise and wonderful way. For a number of weeks, this businessman daily declared these ideas to himself. No change seemed to be forthcoming, but he persisted in knowing that there was a solution. He persisted in claiming divine restoration. One day, the picture began to change through an unusual series of events. He and his wife attended a family reunion where his deceased brother's wife called him aside and said, "Years ago, when you first began buying into my husband's business, which later became your own, I felt that he overcharged you for the initial down payment. Now that he is gone, I no longer wish to retain the building which houses your business. I also wish to see financial restitution made to you for that large initial payment. An appraiser tells me that the building is worth $25,000 if I sell it outright. However, I will be happy to sell it to you for $10,000. Further appraisals revealed that this man could obtain a total loan of $16,000. After purchasing the building, he still had $6,000 to clear up pressing debts and have operating cash. As these affairs unfolded, he was filled with new hope. And thereafter, he received increased business, which helped to bring order and prosperity out of previous chaos and failure. Indeed, divine restoration did take place for him. Keep quiet about indebtedness. Many people who get into debt would not remain in it if they would keep quiet about their financial affairs. By magnifying their obligations, they clutch those circumstances to them ever more tightly. if they would keep quiet, keep going, do the best they could to meet their obligations and affirm divine guidance, the way would open to clear up all indebtedness. The well-known Bible story of Elisha and the widow is a subtle example of this. When the widow lamented to Elisha of her sad plight and that a creditor was going to take her sons from her, Elisha did not sympathize with her. Instead, he told her to go into her house, shut the door, and start pouring out the oil she had on hand. This was a wonderful Oriental way of telling her to cease her wailing about her debts and financial problems and to begin using whatever substance was on hand to meet the situation, knowing that as she did her part, substance would multiply and fill every need. A widow in recent times likewise proved the prospering power of Elisha's advice. This woman had a very troubled life. She was lonely, in debt, unhappy in her work, dissatisfied with her life in general. While she sought freedom from her indebtedness all the time, she bemoaned how harshly life had treated her. Her financial circumstances became more stringent than ever. Though she continued to receive pay raises and other financial blessings, finally she realized that in talking hard times, her very words were her worst enemy. She became silent about her financial affairs. For all the hard experiences of her life, she was asked to affirm divine restoration and to dwell upon the promises in the Bible. As she began to meditate on these promises, everything in her life changed. She received a promotion with a pay increase. A friend of long standing whom she had once aided decided to show appreciation by giving her $1,000. With this money, she paid her debts and was financially free for the first time in years. Soon she married happily, and after having been alone for 20 years, truly the years which financial lack had consumed were restored to her. Speak only in prosperous terms. Instead of worrying, fretting, or talking about your debts, it pays to affirm prosperous results and to speak only in prosperous terms. A woman who had been out of work due to ill health found herself deeply in debt, but she constantly talked negatively about her situation. One night, she and her daughter attended a lecture on prosperity. When they returned home, they decided to use an affirmation given in the lecture. Everything and everybody prospers us now, and we prosper everything and everybody now. They began declaring these words together each night for 5 minutes before retiring. Within a week, a check for $2,500 came to them, representing a sum which had long been lawfully owed them, but their lawyer had been unable to collect. As they changed their words when speaking about their financial affairs, it was as though all involved suddenly wanted to prosper them rather than to withhold anything from them. An artist was in debt because she had been unable to sell any of her paintings for a number of months. One night, she attended a prayer group in which the power of praying affirmatively about financial problems was emphasized. At this meeting, it was suggested that each one take an affirmation and use it during the coming week for prosperity needs. This idea seemed a radically different approach to this artist who had always felt that perhaps it was wrong to pray about money and financial problems. Joyously, she began to daily declare, "Everything and everybody prospers me now, and I prosper everything and everybody now." 4 days later, she sold a painting for $75, her first sale in months. Immediately, other sales were made, and soon every financial obligation had been met. No one can withhold your prosperity. Many people also get into financial lack and remain there because they think someone else is keeping their prosperity from them. As long as they think someone else has the power, they themselves are decreeing that it is true. But once they change the trend of their thinking, their good can appear in spite of any outer circumstances. A widow who had tried in vain for over a year to settle her deceased husband's estate was heavily in debt because an unexpected heir had appeared, so that a court proceeding became necessary. The estate funds were under court control. For months, she had been living meagerly from day to day, hoping that the estate would soon be settled and that she would receive a check in full for the inheritance which was rightfully hers. Each time it seemed near settlement, the case was delayed because of further resistance from the other heir. During a period when her collectors and creditors were pressing hard for payment, of some of her late husband's bills, this woman was given prosperity articles to read by a friend. In them, she found this affirmation: I dissolve in my own mind and in the minds of all others any idea that my God-given good can be withheld from me. Those financial blessings that are mine by divine right now come to me in abundance, and I joyously accept them. Fascinated with the possibility of this simple approach to her problem, this woman sat quietly all afternoon, writing out and affirming this statement over and over. As she did, she began to feel a sense of dominion welling up within her about her financial affairs. She also began to feel more kindly toward the unexpected heir who was trying to force his claim on her husband's estate. The more she thought peacefully about him, the more she could see why he felt entitled to certain financial assets. Finally, she telephoned her lawyer, told him to use his own judgment in settling the estate, but to feel free to give that heir certain portions of the stocks, bonds, and oil properties which he claimed. Within a few days, the estate had been pending for months was settled, so that all involved were satisfied, prospered, and blessed. This woman now feels that her God-given good came to her from the settlement of the estate, and she did not miss the financial assets shared with this unexpected heir. Deliberately think big. In another instance, a realtor found himself going into debt because some of his apartments were not renting during a summer slack period. Friends told him, "You will never rent those apartments at the price you're asking. You are thinking too big. If you cut your rental price, perhaps you may be able to rent them for the coming season." This man attended a prosperity lecture where he heard, "You can never think too big. Dare to think big, dare to affirm big ideas, dare to expect big results. Such attitudes are the difference between a prince and a pauper." This man realized that he must deliberately think big and speak prosperously if he wished to rent his properties and pay his debts. For the rental of his apartments, he began affirming a statement that has prospered countless people. "I love the highest and best in all people, and I now draw the highest, best, and most prosperous-minded people to me," though he had shown the unrented apartments several times without success. The very next client to appear was delighted with his apartments and rented one for the season for $2,000. As he continued using this prosperous statement, his other properties were rented easily. Within a short time, he had received checks totaling $8,000, which enabled him to become debt-free. Begin to pay cash for more items. Along with getting prosperous attitudes about our financial affairs, it is good to do whatever tangible or intangible thing you can to get the feeling that you are clearing up indebtedness. For instance, begin paying cash for items, though you may do so in a small way. Just by releasing cash for such items rather than by charging them, you begin to get a sense of freedom from debt. I know of 2 housewives who decided that the approaching holiday season was the time to prove this. They stopped charging gift items and began paying cash as they stopped. Later, they declared that spending cash gave them a sense of joy and freedom. In each instance, they found that as they blessed and gave thanks for divine wisdom in using the cash on hand, money kept coming to them for Christmas giving. One housewife went all through the holiday season without charging anything. She stated she has also gave the best gifts ever. The other housewife finally resorted to her charge accounts for a few gifts, but she had already purchased so many for cash, the few charged did not give her a sense of burden. She did not dread facing payment of them in the new year, and she could quickly pay them as they came due. Dismiss financial mistakes of past. Another financial attitude that binds many people to indebtedness is this. Like Lot's wife, they continue to look back. They worry about financial mistakes of the past and thus crystallize their thinking, which manifest as present indebtedness. When you look back, there is no room in your thinking for new ideas which could clear up past mistakes and indebtedness. To forgive yourself and others of past mistakes is essential if you wish to be permanently free of financial burden. If such memories try to haunt you, use this statement. The forgiving love of divine intelligence has set me free from the past and from the financial mistakes of the past. I now face the present and the future wise, secure, and unafraid. It will work wonders for you and for others, as stated in the vacuum law of prosperity. It is necessary that we constantly forgive ourselves and others if we wish to be prospered. ask for prosperous ideas. Along with the establishing prosperous attitudes and following through with prosperous actions, one should ask for prosperous ideas about financial matters. A businessman had reached the age of 40 and had gone as far as he could with his company unless one of its owners retired. This very fine Christian man did not wish to succeed through such circumstances, but he was growing desperate. Even though he and his wife both worked, they were heavily in debt, trying to meet the needs of their growing family. They could see no way to a larger income in their present circumstances. When this man talked with me, he said, "I need more self-confidence in knowing that somehow I can meet this situation victoriously. I suppose I need more order in my affairs so that I might know which way to turn." It was suggested that he go about establishing order in an easy, quiet, satisfying way rather than to suddenly become aggressive, which might lead to confusion and antagonism with others. It was suggested he began spending a few minutes every morning and night to quietly meditate and ask for divine guidance about his financial affairs. His first reaction was, "What good will that do? You mean God knows or cares about my financial affairs?" It was a revelation and a relief to this man to hear that a rich and loving father cares about the financial needs of his children. This prayer was suggested for his use. "Father, what is the rich truth about my financial affairs? What is your highest good for all in this situation?" At first, no answer to this questioning prayer came, but this man did notice that he was more peaceful than he had been in years. With the increased feeling of peace, he began to feel more in control of himself, his family, and his financial world. One night, as he was decreeing the rich truth, an idea flashed into his mind with such force that he almost fell out of his chair. It was not a new idea. It had come to him many times before, but he had disregarded it. It was an idea to develop a new department that could mean fresh growth and prosperity for his firm. Never before had he been strongly enough convinced of the power of this idea to approach his superiors. The next day, he found the perfect opportunity for speaking with his boss about it. His boss was both surprised and pleased that this quiet little man was thinking in such big, progressive, and prosperous terms about the company. In due time, he was allowed to develop his idea for a special department, a new title, and much better income accompanying it. Other financial surprises followed, with one member of his family receiving an unexpected inheritance. By praying for divine guidance and divine ideas, this man's debts of long standing were paid. A whole new level of prosperous living opened to him and his family. A good statement to hold in mind for this purpose is divine intelligence now inspires me with prosperous ideas and with divine action in perfectly expressing those ideas. Indebtedness can be a blessing in disguise. Indebtedness can be a tremendous blessing in disguise. When unpleasant experiences come upon you, it is often because there are new ways of living and new methods of work trying to open to you. In most instances of indebtedness, those who are financially embarrassed are very fine people who are trying to live prosperously on a limited income. However, if they have rich desires, it is because they also have rich talents and abilities they are seeking expression. Their desire for richer good is very strong, but their bank account has not been equally expanded. Often they are people who are doing a mediocre work when their talents and abilities, if developed, would bring them a rich income to balance out their rich desires. Dare to use new ideas that come to you when you are working out financial problems. Reread, study, and follow some of the suggestions for developing your talents and abilities that are given in the chapters on work and on financial independence. When you are trying to find your financial freedom, begin to bring it forth by declaring often, "There are good days ahead. There are rich days ahead." When fear about present problems seems to engulf you, simply remind yourself, "God's way for me is joyous, a way of safety and security. I give thanks that I now walk in paths of pleasantness, prosperity, and peace." For development of your talents and abilities to bring great satisfaction, declare often, "The boundless, limitless power that created the universe is now accomplishing in and through me all that is for my highest good in mind, body, and affairs. I give thanks that I am divinely equipped to accomplish great things with ease." So if you're in debt in this moment, I want you to look at it as a blessing. I want you to change your thoughts. couple of things to remember from this teaching is that people can read your thoughts. So if you're thinking badly about somebody that you owe debt to, or if you're thinking badly about somebody that owes you money, they're less likely to pay you, and you may be less likely to pay them. Become peaceful with your communications, both internally and externally, and the people around you. Think positively and affirm this way of thinking. You may be in debt because of the way you've been thinking. So if that's the case, no big deal. It's easy to fix. You just need to change the way that you're thinking. Anything can be overcome. Anything is possible. Whatever your situation that you're in, I promise you, you'll be able to overcome this. So remember some of these affirmations and put in the comments if you've overcome debt. Overcoming debt is different than becoming prosperous. They are tied to each other in many ways, because once you've overcome the debt, the prosperity mindset takes over and you become in a surplus, which for many people is difficult to understand. They've constantly lived in debt. The way the world is set up with student loans and credit cards, it's amazing how easily it is to fall into these debts that we're talking about. But for now, I just want you to say these affirmations. I'm going to give them together. I give thanks for the immediate, complete payment of all financial obligations. I have faith that with God's help, all obligations are being immediately paid in full. The same divine trust that first motivated this financial transaction and all financial transactions is now mightily at work, clearing it up for the highest good of all concerned. There is no condemnation or criticism between us. Divine love reigns supreme, and all is well with me and the world. I give thanks for divine restoration in my business affairs. Divine restoration is now doing its perfect work for all involved, and the perfect result appears now. I give thanks that every financial obligation is now being met in God's own wise and wonderful way. Everything and everybody prospers us now, and we prosper everything and everybody now. I dissolve in my own mind and in the minds of all others any idea that my God-given good can be withheld from me. Those financial blessings that are mine by divine right now come to me in abundance, and I joyously accept them. I love the highest and best in all people, and I now draw the highest, best, and most prosperous-minded people to me. The forgiving love of divine intelligence has set me free from the past, and from the financial mistakes of the past, I now face the present and the future wise, secure, and unafraid. Father, what is the rich truth about my financial affairs? What is your highest good for all in this situation? Divine intelligence now inspires me with prosperous ideas and with divine action in perfectly expressing those ideas. There are good days ahead. There are rich days ahead. God's way for me is joyous, a way of safety and security. I give thanks that I now walk in paths of pleasantness, prosperity, and peace. The boundless, limitless power that created the universe is now accomplishing in and through me all that is for my highest good in mind, body, and affairs. I give thanks that I am divinely equipped to accomplish great things with ease. I am so happy and grateful for the complete payment of all financial obligations in God's own wonderful way. Now, if you continue to repeat these and understand the role that your mindset plays in the indebtedness, you keep yourself quiet, not talking about it with a lot of people, not focusing on it, but focusing on your prosperity, you can overcome whatever debts that you have. You can overcome having to declare bankruptcy. All things are possible, and I want you to be prosperous. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.